Hello everyone. I'm now back. It's been a while. I wasn't on the live stream, but yeah, I was busy working on some other stuffs. I'm sure I will share with you what I've been working on. That was the past previous 2 weeks. So yeah, you're welcome back to the live stream. And today I will be mainly talking about the AWS. So that will be the main topic that I'll be talking about. And I'll be talking about also my findings and what I learned from AWS. So you might ask, why am I learning AWS? I'm getting into AWS because it's really, really mandatory as a software engineer in this era. You don't need to just limit yourself to only doing software development, but you can also experiment more and also like cross the boundaries and do things that others aren't doing. So yeah, before I start with what I really going to explain today and what I really learned and my findings, I'll be sharing what I learned also. That's previous, not actually what I learned, but the things that I've been working on uh, in the past previous weeks. It was probably 2 weeks from now. Uh, so the past 2 weeks, I was really into documentation and into project management. Okay, I was really into documentation and project management. And you might ask, why am I doing project management and why am I seriously on documentation? Uh, it is really, really necessary to do documentation and this project management because you're not, as a software developer or as a DevOps engineer, that's how I refer to myself. You don't need to just limit yourself to only writing tickets. No, you don't need yourself to only like grinding these tickets. These ticket grinders, these software engineers that are called ticket grinders, not actually software engineers, but software developers. That era is really done because they used to give you tickets, and tickets are basically like, let's say, a user story, uh, task, bug fix, or these small things. They usually give you those things to fix, and you're done. That is your work as a software engineer, as a software developer. But with this era of AI, you don't need to be this ticket grinder. Like you need to be not a jack of all trade, but you need to understand and do. You need to understand in depth. This is the era of being in depth, because if you are not too competitive and uh, you're not into depth, you will you will eventually not fit into this software engineering thing, because nowadays this software engineering is all about in depth, and you need to uh, just a minute. Yeah, as I was saying, you need to be in depth and you need to be building projects that not only these to do these small simple applications that you'll be building. You need to build something that has a real world impact, and to build something that has a real world impact, you cannot just build it with without documentation. You need to document. You need serious documentation. So yeah, that's why I was into this documentation and project management. And yeah, the main thing I really learned from project management and documentation was this documentation, like the PRD, the technical requirements document, the use case document. These are the necessary documentation that you need for your application. I know there are so many documentations, but these are the pillars of project management and this documentation. So these are the documentations. This is the PRD. We have the PRD, and then I have the use case. Use case, the PRD and the use case are like the behavioral documentations, like a model the behavior of the user. when they're using your application. I will go into deep into this, but not in this live stream. And the main thing that I was trying to tell you guys is that you have to create this documentation, and then after creating this documentation, you have to translate them into technical requirements. Into technical requirements where other developers can implement what you have done. So this used to be the work of only the people who are on top in, let's say, in the startup or certain company. These are done by people who these are done by the senior engineers, these are done by the project managers. So you used to have you don't have any control over this. But if you're building your own, you need to have control over this. So you will definitely you have to definitely understand behind the hood what is happening. So yeah, you need to write your documentation, translate them into user stories. From user stories, translate them into minor tasks by translate them into the tasks that other developers can execute. So to do that, you need also a way to diagram this. You need to draw a lot of diagrams. So let me just show you a quick overview of the diagrams that I have. So let me come down here, start from the first diagram. That is the sequence diagram. I know most of you guys know about all these kind of diagrams. I have the sequence diagram. And what the sequence diagram does is it models the user behavior. You know, it models how the user is going to use our application or the main feature that we are modeling. It's not necessary for me to go deep into this, but I'm just showing you guys what I've been working on. And here is this is the use case diagram. This is also part of the behavioral diagram. And then I have the entity diagrams, and then I have the activity diagrams. Yeah. And then down here I have this is a UML entity diagram. I just need to show this. Okay, this is a component diagram, and if you have reached this level, that means you can translate this diagram into technical task, into what the developers will do. So you have to do this. The last diagram I have, this is the overview of the cloud infrastructure. Yeah, this is just for a single service, and I will go deep into this in its own live stream. So enough with that, let's go to today's agenda, what I would be going into and what I have learned from the cloud. As I told you, I'm also getting into the cloud, and to get into the cloud, you might ask, why am I getting into the cloud? I'm getting into the cloud because I'm really into DevOps. DevOps, DevOps is DevOps uh, is a required skills and is an in-demand skills right now. DevOps, there's high demand of DevOps engineers uh, within 2026 and years to come. It's like DevOps is like he's been in is in the era where software engineering was booming. That was back in the days like in 2020, uh, 2019 and 2011. So software engineering, we had a lot of demand of software engineering. But as years are passing by, the demand is now reducing. The demand of software engineers is now reducing because there's too much supply of software engineers, and there are so many software engineers in the market there. So DevOps, this is where DevOps come. DevOps is still in its early stages. Uh, it's still like many companies didn't adapt it, but as I can talk right, as I talk right now, there are so many companies that have adapted DevOps. Uh, so what are the skills needed for you to learn to get into DevOps and to be okay to balance between DevOps and software engineering? So the skills needed to for you to be in DevOps, you need to have a strong background in Linux. You need to be good at shell scripting. You need to be good at Linux administration, Linux system administration, and you need to be good at networking. And you need to be good at cloud. Basically, that is any cloud provider that you choose, such as AWS, Azure, or Google GCP. So if you have good foundation in the cloud, in Linux, and in networking, then you need to learn how to build proper CI/CD pipelines, and you need to learn how to work with container orchestration tools like Kubernetes and containerization of your application using Docker. Yeah. So these are the things that you need to learn. And from my findings and my learning, I heard that if you're really serious about that, it can take you like six to 1 year of serious learning and seriously experimenting with DevOps tools. Yeah, you can take it that one year to 1 year, or if you really a quick learner, 6 months, and yeah, you can land your first DevOps job. Yeah, so let's get into AWS and let's talk about what I learned today. Today I not today, but the previous days I've been working with AWS, and I have been experimenting and I have been learning. And before I forget, I was I'm planning to do the AWS certification. That is AWS Cloud Practitioner. That is the entry level of AWS. If you want to be certified as an AWS with AWS. So yeah, this is my process of preparing for the exams of AWS. And AWS Cloud Practitioner is basically the entry level into the cloud. I have the basics of cloud and I have worked with AWS, but I'm trying to like I'm trying to deep dive and get in-depth knowledge of AWS. So what did I really learn from this? The first thing I learned was basically working with IAM users, and IAM users are basically like you don't have to use the root user, let's say the root account, because he because the root account is mainly for the administration, and I don't think there's any AWS. There are people, there are users who use. I don't think there are people, the developers or the people working with the cloud use the root users. You have to use something called the IAM users, and the IAM user is like a user that has a limited amount of privileges and these privileges include the services that you have to access in AWS. So the first thing that you have to do when you get into the cloud, you need to look into IAM users and how to create IAM users. The second thing is how to secure your account by using two-factor authentication, because these are very, very confidential information. Let's say if you start working in production, you don't need uh, attackers to easily get into your account and do things that are not necessary, do unauthorized things, which will downgrade your business. So this is the AM users. But then the thing that I really learned and I have in-depth knowledge in is the AWS region. And you might ask, what is a region? A region is basically a physical location where AWS has a group of data centers referred to as an availability zone. Basically, a region is a geographical location of AWS, a geographical location where AWS has a group of data centers. These data centers work together. They work together and provide a single service to the user. They act as a single giant resource to the user, to the end user. So these data centers are grouped into something called AZs, or availability zones. The availability zones are a group of isolated data centers within a certain region where where they are connected through high throughput internet cables. So let's say before I proceed, let's continue talking about the regions, and before I go into the of availability zones. Uh, the regions that we have in AWS, we have US East, that is basically in North Virginia, and we have US West. We have Africa, that is mainly in Cape Town, South Africa, and we have US West. This US West East, this US West region has has a group of data centers that is for the government, that is mainly used by the government of the United States. That the government of the United States and these agencies that are related to the government. So this AWS region is not accessible by other people around the globe. It's only accessible by the United States government. We have regions in Europe, that is in Stockholm. Basically, this region of Stockholm is in Central Europe, and then we have in Spain, that is still in Europe. We have in Milan. Yeah, these are the region, and I will show you in the map how these regions are and how this concept really connects to other concept in AWS. I have one of my great friends in the live stream. So yeah, welcome to the stream. Yeah, you're welcome to the stream. And yeah, so far this is what I have to offer to others. Yeah, let's go. And then I was talking about the availability zones. And I said the availability zones are a group of isolated data centers in a particular region. And these data centers are isolated to make AWS highly available. Okay, what does this mean? So one of the pillars of cloud, or let's say pillars in AWS, we have the high availability. If you want to make, if you have a service or you have something, you have a platform that you're trying to host on AWS, so you need your platform to be highly available. So for you to make it highly available, you need AWS comes in this. So the reason why we have availability zone is because we need high availability. And as I said, availability zones are a group of data centers within a particular region. Let's say in US East, we have availability zones, and basically they are maximally they can be six availability zones, and some region they have three availability zones. So these availability zones are distinct data centers, but they are connected through high throughput internet cable. So this is how it looks. Let me just show you a visual way of how to see this. We have here the region, let's say US East, that is in the North Virginia. And then within US East, we have, let's say that in US East, realistically speaking, we have like 6 availability zones. But in my diagram, I'm just showing only 2 availability zones for easy understanding of this topic. And then here we have, like, let's say availability zones, that is US East 1. I'm having this US East 1A, that is a letter to distinguish the availability zone. Like, let's say in this availability zone is US East B. This is like the naming convention of availability zones in AWS. So this is the availability zones. That is like different places in North Virginia that has these data centers. And then we have individual data centers, such as, let's say this is the individual data centers, and they communicate with each other. And these availability zones also communicate with other availability zones. So let's say I try to host my platform. Let's say I hosted the database here, and I hosted the server here, and I replicate most of the servers here. So let's say if this server goes down, the server in US East B goes down, my users will still continue using my application from US East 1A. So that is the main thing of availability. So, and also one thing I will be talking about here is that I didn't include here is that availability zones helps you in fault tolerance. What is fault tolerance? The main aim of fault tolerance is that let's say if there is any disaster that happened, let's say there is a disaster that happened within this availability zone, the other availability zones are not affected. The data centers and the data of the user are not affected. So within fault tolerance, we have something called fault domain and fault level. Fault domain is basically the area that is vulnerable to threats such as that is vulnerable to threats or that is vulnerable to failure. And the fault level is in which level is that? Let's say this AWS region can be a fault level, and then these availability zones can be the fault domain. So if there's something that happened within this fault domain, it should not go across the whole region. It should only remain within the fault domain. So that is the main aim of fault tolerant. So as I said, this is the convention of working with availability zones. and sometimes they are referred to as AZs. So yeah, across the globe, here is where the AWS has different availability zones. And within this map, I don't think this map is clear. I'll try to increase the size, but I think okay. Click on this image. I don't know what is happening. Okay, but I think this is the last size. Okay, no problem. So yeah, this is in the United States. That is in the US West, and here is in the US East. So we have the Gov Cloud. That is the government data centers. That region is specifically for the government of the United States, where they host their confidential information. It's not used by other people. And then we have here, that is I think in that is this is the Gov Cloud, and these might be the data center, the regions that we have in USA, the US East, US East 1, US East 2, and US East 3. And then we also have the availability zones within these regions. So yeah, this is we have one in North Virginia, one in Ohio, and then in I don't know the last one, but I will try to look it up. So here in the US West, we have also one Gulf cloud that is I think mainly for the people in the western side of the United States. We have one Gulf cloud, and then we have one Gulf cloud, and then we have US West 1, US West 2, US West 3 with their separate availability zones. And then coming to Africa, we have one in Cape Town. That is the only. I'm so disappointed why we have in Africa we only have one AWS region that is in Cape Town. But that doesn't mean we will be uh, lagging or we will be lagging behind. Or our data takes a full round trip to the United States or to the regions that are near us in Africa. No, there is something called POP. POP stands for point of presence. What does it mean? Point of presence in AWS is areas where AWS has a point of presence. Uh, to explain it more, the areas in AWS where AWS has something called Edge Cloud. If you're a web developer, you heard about something called Edge. Edge, Edge is like if you use Vercel, or you use something, or you use a service in AWS called CloudFront. These are the edge computing services we mostly know. So what does that mean? AWS has data centers that are not like that are, they are not the main data centers, but they communicate with the region. They communicate with the data centers in the region, such as we have one in Kenya. I think that helps. The one in Kenya, I think in Nairobi, it has the data center communicates with the region we have in Cape Town, and it is mainly used for caching. You know, so let's say we have content creators in Africa, mainly in East Africa. They don't. Their videos, let's say the videos, the images, doesn't have to take a round trip up to US so that it can be hosted in West Virginia or North Virginia, or it can be hosted in Cape Town. No, their images are cached, and their images and the content are cached within Nairobi, the data centers in Nairobi, and they are served to the nearby users. We have one in Lagos, Nigeria. I think we have in Egypt, and yeah, I think these are the main countries we have edge location in Africa. So let's go back to regions. We have one in Israel. That let's go to Asia, and then we go to Europe. So in Asia, the main one we had a lot of in Asia. Asia has a big AWS market, and it has in Israel. I think the one in Israel here is pretty much new region. I think it was built basically 2023. That's how I think of. But I will have to do more research about it. Yeah, we have one in Tel Aviv that is in Israel. It's pretty new, and then the reason why I have them red here is because they are the new data centers. They were supposed to be built, but right now they are currently built. I think the one in Canada here, Central Canada, is already functioning, and then this is also already functioning. Yeah. Then we have one in UAE. We have in Saudi Arabia. That's the region, and then we have in Hyderabad, that is in India, and then we have in Mumbai. We have in China, but China has different history compared to what we have here in Africa and the one we have in the United States and Europe. For China, AWS has partnered with Chinese government. Uh, the AWS has to use the local databases in the local data centers in China so that it can have fully private. China has to be autonomous. Uh, they don't have to be controlled by AWS, but it is still part of AWS. Uh, as I can in AWS, I think the reason why they have this is China. I know China, they have confidential information they don't want to share with other people, but they also have their AWS China. So if you want to work with AWS and you're in China, you have to use Chinese data centers. You don't have to work with data centers in the United States and this. And then we have in Australia, probably in Melbourne, and then we have in Iceland, we have in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, and then yeah, Taiwan. Yeah. So let's go to Europe. That is very interesting. In Europe, here in we have in Spain, we have in Milan, we have in Spain, Milan, and then we have in Holman, and then we have in I think Iceland. There's so many data centers in Europe, AWS data centers in Europe. Yeah. So this is AZs. This is basically the regions in AWS, and let's see them in real map. So that let me bring it across here. So this is what I was talking about. When you open AWS website, we have AWS Gulf Cloud US West. And I think it's probably here. Let me click on it. It will immediately show it here. That is in the west coast of the United States. Is it clear? Let me. Oh, I have to. Okay, like this. I can be clear. And then in Canada Central, that was pretty new. That it was launched in 2019. That is here in Canada. And then we have in Canada West also. I feel like in Africa we are left behind, but this AWS has to address that because we need more regions in Africa. We only have one in Cape Town, and it is available. We only have this one in Cape Town. Let me, if I can rotate them up. Let me see that. Okay, then go back to the United States. Okay. I don't know why it's not rotating, but I will only have one. And then the edge locations that I was talking about, we have so many edge locations, and basically these guys they focus on the United States. But what I know, we have in Nairobi, we have in Lagos, and then I don't know the other places in Africa like Egypt, but yeah, basically we have these edge locations. So let's get into this in real action. Let me open it here. This is my AWS. As I was talking, I'm logged in here in AWS with an IAM user that is here, and I even secured my IAM user with two-factor authentication. So the regions that I was talking about is here. As you can see, in AWS you need to select your region. Let's say I need compute, and what is compute? Compute is basically like the EC2 instance or Amazon Lambda. Yeah, this is the compute. But if I need compute, let's say I need a server, okay, a virtual machine from AWS, and then you have to think, okay, if I need the machine, which region in AWS should my virtual machine be in? So you have to choose your region. Sometimes your region is chosen automatically, but you need to choose your region by yourself. Because let's say you're building a big application, you need to understand the cost, because in each region each region has different costs. So in US East, the cost of compute is not the same as in let's say in Africa, Cape Town. So you have to consider the region. And you also have to consider your users. Where will your audience be? So if you consider your audience, then you choose the region that is near to your audience. So this is where you choose the region. And then after choosing the region, we talked about the availability zones, right? And for you to choose availability zones, you don't have to choose them by yourself. What you do, you need to choose availability zone, you need a VPC. What is a VPC? VPC is virtual private cloud. You might ask, what is the work of VPC? A VPC is used to is basically your own network within AWS. Let's say you take a set of data centers. Let's say I'm working on, let's say the data center of my choice is, I chose the region of Africa in Cape Town. Okay, uh, I will choose Cape Town, right? And then Cape Town has many edge locations. Those ones I will use those edge locations for my, let's say, caching my files, caching media content. Yeah. So that would be like for CloudFront or S3 bucket, because these are global services, and I will talk about global services. So I will choose Cape Town. I will choose my region as Cape Town, and then I chose my edge locations within Nairobi because I'm in East Africa. So yeah. So these are my this is my connect my network, right? I will have a virtual private network. So within this network, I will have subnets. I think if you have worked with networking or you did networking, you know something about subnets. In AWS, I can have and what? Private and public subnet. The private subnet is where I will you host my services that are not needed to be used by the users, that are not needed to be interfaced by the users, such as my database, my S3 bucket, my let's say load balancers. And then within my public subnet, I will expose tools that I need the users to use, such as such as API gateways, because I might need the users to use the API gateways. So I will let them use the public subnet. So within public subnet, choosing a region, within public subnet, this is where you choose your public and private subnet, or within your VPC, that is where you choose your availability zone. So let me just give you example with just, I'm not going to create this because most of these AWS services are costing. VPC, and then I will show you what we are talking about in action. Here is that I selected cloud resources, right? Let's see, let me go to my VPCs. Let's wait for it to load, and then we talk about VPCs, and I will also show you where the naming convention comes from. So as you can see, guys, AWS is interesting if you get into it. The only downside of AWS is cloud. It is cost. It is so expensive. So yeah, if you need to get into the cloud, you need to have, but you don't necessarily need to have that money to get these cloud services. You can use the free tier, that is mainly for like experimenting and learning. And then when you have a big platform that you need to host, or you need to migrate to the cloud, you need to think of the budget of migrating to cloud. So this is VPC. Let it load. As you can see, I don't have any VPC here, but I have only the default VPC. Let me open it. If I can see more information about it. Yeah, this is the ID, IP version for your VPC. I just need to see the private and public subnet. Uh, this is the subnet. Aha. As you can see, I have 3 subnets here, right? I think this is basically the private and public subnet. Okay. This is what I was talking about. This is EU North -A1. It means that any resource I put in within this particular subnet, it will be in Europe and it will be in a certain availability zone. I have 3 availability zones. Let's say I distribute my service within these 3 availability zones. And then let's say there is tornado, there is earthquake, or there's any lightning that happened to this, and this availability zone is down. So my services will continue being served to the users within this availability zone. That is basically what I needed to talk to you about availability zones. Then you can have 2 subnets, public and private subnets. So I will be in my next stream also, I'll be talking more about these availability zones in AWS. So yeah, I think I covered most of the things that I needed to cover today. And I need to give bonus things that I haven't, the things that I learned, but the things that I knew, but I haven't deep dive into them. Let's say we have, as you can see here in AWS, I'm clicking on the user interface. But in AWS, there is a AWS API, so you can use AWS API to communicate with the application using the API rather than clicking around. And then we have AWS CLI. I think that is what I meant. You can use the CLI rather than clicking direct. And also, if you are expert in AWS, you can use something. You can use infrastructure as code tools like Terraform, or there's one infrastructure as code that is specific to AWS. That is CloudFront. That is CloudFormation. CloudFormation is infrastructure as code tool that is mainly used in AWS. Infrastructure as code is basically like writing codes. You write the code that, let's say I need a region. I will have to, let's say, I have to code a code that tells AWS, that connects to AWS, that we need this region, and we need this compute service, that is EC2, we need this database, we need this number of replicas. So that is infrastructure as code. And I will be deep diving into infrastructure as code, but in times to come. So, but for now, I will be concentrating on AWS, and I will have to work with most of these AWS services. And to give you a tip, is that AWS, for you to get better in AWS, you only need few services. You don't need to learn all the services. And the few recommended services are, there's compute, that is EC2, networking, that is VPC, and storage, that is S3, and edge, that is CloudFormation, and database, that is RDS. So if you master these 5 AWS services, then you are good to go. So yeah, I think I talked enough about AWS. I might be ending the stream here. And yeah, thank you for watching. I will see you in the next stream. But before going, I have to, let's say, show you what I will be working on in the next stream. The next stream, I will be explaining my process of working, documenting my application. That is the other application, explaining the process and how I got into making the PRD, the technical requirements document, translating them into requirements that users can use, that developers can write code from them. I will also explain that. So yeah, thank you for watching, and see you in the next live stream. I think I will be ending this live stream here.